Welcome to RuralStrong, where we talk real challenges and bold solutions in rural economic development. I'm your host, Joe Barker. Let's get into it. Welcome to RuralStrong. We are broadcasting from the Southwest Tennessee Development District podcast studio in Jackson, Tennessee, and what a guest we have today. We have really a giant in the economic development business. We have Mr. Chad Chancellor with us today. Chad, welcome to RuralStrong.
Thank you, Joe. I'm glad to be here.
Chad is the co-founder of the Next Move Group, and he is responsible for implementing the company's long-term mission of creating economic growth for small and mid-sized companies, communities, and nonprofit organizations. And Chad, I know you've got your own podcast, We Are Jobs.
I do, yeah. We started that, I don't know, in 2018 or so, before the pandemic. And matter of fact, we're about to relaunch it. My nephew passed away a couple of years ago, and when he was sick and going through all of that, I got off track of doing one every week. And so since then, we've been doing one once in a while. We still have all the episodes up there that we did all along, but we're actually about to restart it with weekly shows coming up. So funny you mentioned that, because that's about to be coming back around.
Great. Well, we look forward to that. Well, I know your background, Chad, is interesting. You grew up in a small community. Tell our listeners a little bit about growing up in a small community and your journey into the economic development world.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, and like a lot of southern towns, we had garment manufacturing plants. And my grandmother worked at a glove factory, and my father worked at a blanket factory. And when I was a kid, I don't know, 9 or 10, I guess I was, the blanket factory shut down. I say it shut down. It's still there today, but they took all the production out. They just turned it into a warehouse. So it went from having 600 or 700 employees to 10 or 15. And my dad was one of 10 kids, and he's the last surviving one. That's one thing when you live in a rural town growing up. You have a lot of funerals you have to go to. So he's buried 9 brothers and sisters now. He's the last one. But I guess 4 of them worked at that blanket factory, his twin brother and a couple more. And so I saw what happened when a plant closed in our small rural towns. And of course, this happened over and over in many, many rural towns all over, not just the one I was in. But my dad, he ended up getting construction work, building bridges. A lot of the bridges down on the Gulf Coast where I travel a lot, he worked on and made good money. But he basically would leave home every Sunday evening after the football. We were big New Orleans Saints fans. So after the Saints ball game went off, he would go to his construction work and come back on Friday night. And so I was basically raised in a single-family home, not due to divorce, but because of the lack of economic development. When that plant shut down, there were just no other opportunities in my little hometown where he could have got a job, but it would have been minimum wage. So for him to make decent money, he went and got construction work. So I always got interested in what can we do to help our little towns. It didn't know a whole lot about economic development, but I was interested in it. And when I got to be a junior in high school, the economic development organization in my hometown had a leadership program, a youth leadership program. And many towns still do this.
Absolutely.
You'd go around, and one week you'd learn what the sheriff did or this, that, the other. Well, one week we learned what the economic development did. And I said, now that's something right there I'm interested in because of what happened to my dad. And so I got interested in it. Like many people, still didn't know exactly how to get in it. Went on to college and got a business degree, and then got into it. And my big break is I got hired in Mobile, Alabama, working for the Mobile Chamber in 2005, 6, 7, right through there. And I mean, I was the low man on the totem pole. I think I was making $38,000, which back then was a little more than it is now, but I was a low man on totem pole out of 30 or 40 employees. But I got to see how this all worked. While I was there, we recruited Airbus to do a airplane manufacturing plant. We recruited a steel mill and others, again, of which I had very little to do with other than sitting in the rooms and watching it, but it all clicked for me. And that kind of, once I saw how it worked from the blocking and tackling, I always had the passion and the motivation due to what happened to my father. And so that's kind of what got me to going.
So, talk a little bit, Chad, about your focus on small to mid-sized companies, communities, and nonprofits. And I know your background shaped your views, uh, but that's a difficult market to get into.
Yeah, well, so obviously I've explained my small town side of it, but when it comes to the small to medium sized businesses, I'm of the opinion that if you recruit a good small to medium sized company, they're not going to up and leave to save a penny on labor in Mexico or China or whatnot. All the big guys will. I mean, we saw that. It happened. I can take you to town after town after town where they basically left to go save money on labor in other places. And many of those companies that did that were Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies, and they have every right to do it. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I just not really interested in helping them. But what I have found is if you recruit a mid-sized company, which could still be a big company. I mean, we have clients that do $1 billion in revenue, but in their industry, they're considered mid-size. A lot of times, once you get them, you got them. And I find they're good fits in rural communities because they're just not going up. And every time you turn around, leave for a better deal across the state line or to save money here or there. And my co-founder of my company is a fellow named Alex Metzger. And whereas I was raised real poor and rural, he was raised with a little money in Paducah, Kentucky. And his father and their whole side of the family own meat processing facilities in Kentucky and all through Illinois. And when Walmart came along and started offering meat, it pretty much put them out of business. It didn't put them out, but it got to where their profit margin was so low it wasn't worth the hassle. So they all had made plenty of money. So they ended up shutting that down. And still to this day, if you go up near St. Louis and Illinois and mention Metzger meat packing facility, it's people remembers it. And so, he's got a passion for helping the small to mid-sized companies. And when you combine that with my rural passion and kind of what I always thought, that's really what our goal is. It's funny, Joe, I tell people we're for small to mid-size. I'm from a little old town of 900. I mean, to me, Jackson, Tennessee's mid-sized.
Yeah, we're metro. We're metro.
Yeah. But I'll get phone calls from, Syracuse, New York, which to me, I've always, when I was a boy, I would have thought that's a big city because they got a university, plays football,
Sure.
blah, blah. Well, in their minds, they're mid-sized. So we didn't realize it, but it was a genius marketing slogan because everybody thinks they're mid-sized, even though that's not why we set out to do it that way. But that really is our passion, and we'll help. If somebody calls us up, we've done a bunch of work in New Orleans because I lived over there for 8 or 9 years. If somebody calls us up from a big city and wants us to help them, we will. But that's not what we get up every morning trying to do.
Sure. Well, tell me, Chad, as you match communities and companies, as you look at that relationship, how important it is it to you to make sure that company is going to be a partner with that community?
Oh, it's very important. More so now than even 10 years ago. We started Next New Group in 2014, and I have seen a huge change just in the last 4 or 5 years when it comes to companies caring about the community. And when we first started, it was all about free land or tax incentives or this and that. And now I've got companies when they visit, they're talking about putting child care facilities in the facility.
Absolutely.
Because in some cases, that's a workforce recruitment tool. And I'm seeing them talk about housing and all this other stuff that really helps our communities. One would call it community development. Back in the day, we would have considered all that stuff community development. We wouldn't have really considered it economic development. Well, now these companies are asking you about it, and in many cases are willing to partner and invest in it if you got a good plan. And so I think it's more important now than even 6 or 7 years ago. And if you're recruiting a company, you want them to care. They're going to ask you a lot of hard questions through that recruitment process. But at some point in time, you can tell them, look, we want you here, but we want you to be a partner with us, and here's how you can do that if you've already got plans in place. That's hard to tell a company, we want you to save our town if you have no plan whatsoever. But if you're telling them, listen, we've already got plans to build a new child care facility in our industrial park. we can give you so many seats in it, but we may need your assistance or so forth. A lot of times that can help you sell that company and kind of let them visualize how they can be part of the town.
Absolutely. And Chad, you brought up something that we are seeing more and more here in West Tennessee, and that's the importance in child care to be able to have the workforce you need for the companies you want to recruit. I know that two of the largest companies that have located here in the last few years, Tyson Foods, they now have child care on site. And of course, Blue Oval City, this is part of their plan to have child care. Talk about that a little bit and how important to be able to access child care is to the workforce.
Well, to me, the challenge you have in small to mid-sized communities is you're one of millions. There's only so many Nashvilles, and everybody knows them already. But I use Jackson as an example because I'm from Jackson, or I'm from Mississippi. I'm not from Jackson, but I'm from Mississippi, and Jackson's our state capital.
Right.
Well, there's like 20 Jacksons in the United States. So you just got to be let everybody know which Jackson you are, much less the other. So the towns that figure out the child care, to me, are going to have a huge advantage because everybody else is not going to have figured it out. And that can go right into your recruitment strategy. But basically, and it varies based on what part of the country you're in, but it costs anywhere now between $10,000 and $15,000 a child for child care. In many places, there are wait lists. I spoke at a Florida Chamber of Commerce executives event last year. And even in Florida, in places like Tampa and Miami, not just the small towns, even the big towns, they have 3 and 4 year wait lists. Well, people don't know they're going to have a kid. I mean, how do you get on a wait list? You don't know that. It is a huge problem. But I'm seeing industries build child care facilities within the industry. I know Clarksville, Tennessee is building a child care in their industrial park. And part of their pitch is, if you locate here, you'll have so many seats and so forth. When I was a kid, I stayed with my grandmother. But what's happened is a lot of people now don't live back beside their grandparents. As internet and jobs have changed, people live further away. And I live 4 hours from my mom and dad now. And I love them dearly. I go see them all the time. They came down here last week for the 4th of July. But I live 4 hours away. When I grew up, I lived right across the road from Grandma. So Grandma took care of me,
Absolutely.
You just don't have as much of that anymore. And so you've got a demand of people who don't live right by their grandparents anymore to keep them. And the cost is so high that if I have 2 kids, it's going to cost $25,000 to put them in child care. So I'm better off to stay home and not work. I mean, literally. And so it can make it to where if the wages aren't ridiculously high, it's literally cheaper for somebody to stay home and work. And so what we really look at when we're doing a siting project, and all your listeners can look at in their towns if they get the right databases and statistics, which you can get from universities and various places. But you can actually track the number of women in your labor shed who still are in the labor force participation rate, by if they're no kids, 1 kid, 2 kid plus. And what we like to do is see how big of a drop-off is there in this town for women who work if they have 1 kid versus 2. We're doing something over near Kansas City right now. It's not in Kansas City, but it's in one of the suburbs. I won't say which town. But in the particular town we're looking at, near Kansas City, that's probably 45 minutes away. Women who have only 1 child are still in the labor force like 75% of the time. If they have 2 kids, it's 43%. So that tells you right there, they just simply don't have enough child care to the point that where when a woman has 2 kids, it's cheaper for her to stay at home or just makes more sense for her to. So in that case, you can literally look and see if we had child care and we were able to capture these women who are no longer in the workforce. And some men stay at home too, but it's predominantly women. But you can actually get a figure that can show you, okay, if we actually had this child care, not only does it help our kids, but we would be able to add, 822, whatever the number is, of new people back into the workforce that we can hire. And so we're seeing actually companies analyze that now, and I think that's going into their decision making on adding the child care on site.
Yeah, and Chad, what really I think magnified the child care issue was during COVID. So many of these small child care operations shut down and they didn't open back up. So it just made that problem grow and grow. Well, we're going to move on from child care and let's talk about Next Move Group. I know you're in the recruitment business, but you folks do a lot of other things besides recruitment. And tell our listeners about some of the different programs that Next Move Group provides.
Yeah. So we do site selection where we help small to mid-sized manufacturers figure out where to locate facilities. We do one or two of those a year. So unlike the big consultants that you might visit with at the Site Selectors Guild who do 10 or 15, we do one or two a year because we really do focus on the small to mid-sized manufacturers. So we do that. We also do economic development and elected officials board trainings, where we train them on their roles in economic development and what they can do to move the needle. And even Robert's Rules of Order, you wouldn't believe it, but that's one of our best-selling trainings. There's a lot of new mayors get elected, and they got great ideas, but they're not parliamentary people.
There you go.
They don't know how many motions to take, all this kind of stuff. So we do that, and then we do executive searches, and that started out being for economic development and Chamber of Commerce people. So I know in West Tennessee, we've done some work in Dyersburg as an example. Over the years, that has grown, and now we're doing utilities and public works positions, which absolutely go right into economic development. I kind of tell people, if you think of an economic developer as the quarterback trying to recruit industry, the public works people, the utilities people, your city engineer, all those people, that's the offensive line. And I don't care how good your quarterback is. If you don't have a good offensive line, you're not going to win a Super Bowl. You may win some games, but you're not going to win the Super Bowl. And so over the years, we've gotten into all that recruiting. And so right now, Columbia, Missouri, we're hiring their assistant director of their electric system for the city of Columbia. So we do, city engineers, planners, utilities, public works, all that kind of stuff. Economic development's still the majority of that business, but over time it's grown, and I'm pleased with that growth because I do think we can help economic developers by helping them get good partners at those other organizations in town who can help them be successful.
Well, your organization does great work in that arena. You've got a great contact network that you can really cast a very wide net. You mentioned one thing, Chad, and I know you've got a whole training on it, but I get these questions a lot about elected officials being the lead economic developer. And in rural communities, sometimes just due to finances, that mayor is just sort of osmosis, assumes that role. Now, my personal opinion is that's not the best way to do it, but I'd like to get your opinion on the role of an elected official in economic development.
Yeah, well, we've done so many of these searches now. We've had 800 or 900 clients. I've seen it done every way in the world, from public-private organizations to the Chamber of Commerce doing it to the city just having a municipal position. There's no right or wrong answer, but the ways that I see it really work best. Again, unless you just have no money at all to where the mayor needs to personally do it. The way I see it work best is to hire a professional who has some experience somehow, either by working at another organization as a number two, much as I did at Mobile, or, there are degree programs that teaches the basics. So Southern Miss has one. But, getting somebody that kind of understands the technical aspects of it. Because the mayor has so many other worries. I mean, they've got to worry about, crime and all these other roads and all. So it's real hard for them to do it full time. But typically they need to be a real fine salesperson for the community, and then let their economic developers kind of do the technical work. But where cities can really help is pursuing infrastructure funding. And I know at the development district, y'all can help them with that. Infrastructure is a problem in our country. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's the one thing most people agree on. And so the communities that figure out how to always be upgrading, particularly water and wastewater system. If your wastewater system ever, I wouldn't have known this when I was an economic developer. I've learned this doing the site selection stuff. If your wastewater system ever gets, out of date or not big enough to handle demand, it is very expensive to fix it. So I think one of the main things that mayors can do, and sometimes their utilities won't be right under their purview. It may be a separate entity, but they'll have board appointments and all. It's just constantly meet with their utilities folks and figure out how can we grow these systems. A lot of times there's money out there you can find. You may have to match it, but a lot of times you get federal money or state monies, and it'll require 10% match or 20%, which gets expensive, but that's money well spent. So, to me, the more the elected officials focus on infrastructure, public safety, everybody wants good public safety, good schools, and get you a technical person to do your economic development. And then the best sales pitch I've ever seen came from a mayor. It did not come from an economic developer. Let me tell you, the town in Texas, I'm not going to say where it was. We went over there with a site selection visit, and, we did all our standard stuff. And the mayor visited with us in addition to the economic developer, Chamber of Commerce, and all that. And my client asked the mayor why we ought to go to that town. And 9 mayors out of 10 would say, well, we have great people and great locations and all. And, and they're right. They're not lying, but that's just what they would say.
Well, that's what every mayor says.
This fella pulled out a manila folder. Now, this has been 8 or 9 years ago when you still had manila folders. Everything now is on your computer. But anyway, he pulled out a manila folder and he said, here's the last 12 problems that we solved as a city for our businesses. And I mean, one of them was as simple as a pothole in the industrial park we see. They weren't all expensive problems. He did. He said, these are 12 problems that we've solved. I don't remember if it was this year, the last year, or whatever, but to help our businesses. And if you come here and you have a problem, we're going to try to. I can't promise you nothing, but we're going to try to help you solve them. And my client remembered that. We talk about that to this day. And so, I think one of the things that a mayor can do is not only have your sales pitch down of how nice your town is, but think about some problems you solve. And that'll go a long way with these industrial prospects.
That's right.
But I will say this: there's many times you want a professional economic development. If you're dealing with a publicly traded company, and it gets out where they're looking, or somehow somebody runs in the newspaper that you violated their confidentiality, and the mayor says they're looking here, or whatever, you can absolutely be sued over it. I've seen people sued over it. Because those publicly traded companies, they have to share information that affects their stock price in a certain format. They got to tell their shareholders first, or else they're literally violating securities exchange laws. And so there are many cases, if I were the mayor, I would want to have an economic developer so he or she could sign those confidentiality papers instead of myself. Because you may have public records where you have to tell it. I saw a mayor, Joe, he owned stock of some company in his retirement account, much as I and you probably do. We don't know all the stocks we own with all these funds. I'm liable to own a bunch of Google, don't even know it. and all of a sudden, he was quoted in the paper that's talking about this company looking to come to town, and they ended up suing him because he actually owned shares of that company, and they ended up suing, claiming that he knew something before the other shareholders. And so there's many reasons that you want an economic developer to be your protection and be your go-between so that you and your public laws and so forth don't get in trouble.
What about, Chad, and I know in some places it has been successful, and your experience, where you've got rural community, let's say rural counties, 2 or 3 of them go together and they pool their funds to hire an economic developer, a professional that works regionally. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. Where I've seen it work and not work, usually it works with all the people who agreed originally, because they know what they agreed to it for. They know their weaknesses and strengths and why they did it and all. Where I see it go off track is 5 or 6 years later when you've got new mayors, new county commissioners, or new people who weren't there for the history of it. that don't remember why we did it. So a lot of times I see them get off to great starts. I think they make all the sense in the world. If I were in a small rural town, I'd absolutely do it. But I think if you're going to do it, you got to have a really good new board member orientation program. I mean, you got to know on day one that, okay, a year from now, if we have a new mayor in one of our towns or a new banker or whatever, this is how we're going to orient them. I mean, we're going to have a 3-ring binder with all of our accomplishments and strategic plans, and we're going to have this person taking the lunch, and we're going to do that. You know, if you just get new folks involved and just welcome them to their first meeting, it can go off track real quick. But I think pooling the money makes sense. Prospect generally does not care where the county line is. They don't even care where the state line is. I mean, I've seen many deals on, in places like West Tennessee where they're going to be drawing labor from Arkansas or Mississippi or Kentucky. They don't really care. Missouri, they don't care where that state line is. So the more you can do to pool your resources to have a bigger marketing reach, the better off. But yeah, I've seen it go bad years on down the line. So you've got to think right out of the bat when you set that thing up, how are we going to have continuity and orient these new people on why we do it this way?
Let me ask you, Chad, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing economic developers today?
Today, I think they're spread so thin. So I started in this business in 2004, 21 years ago now. And back then it was simple. We recruited industry. I mean, we prepared industrial sites as best we could. We got infrastructure to them, and we went out and recruited industry. And now, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I go to towns and they're recruiting retail. And again, if you've got a big sales tax base, that's probably smart. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's a whole different skill set. And now you've got the child care issue we just discussed, and all these other issues. So now I think the biggest challenge is there's not a singular focus, and many economic developers are pulled in 100 directions. The workforce issue is a huge problem, and it's even going to be a problem when AI comes along, because what you're going to have happen, you're going to see industries that are great industries, they're going to hire less people to have all these machines do all their work. So then you're going to have elected officials saying, well, they employ 100 less people than they used to. We are not help them, because that's an issue. So I think there's just so many more community development demands and retail recruitment and things that economic developers are just pulled real thin.
Well, we've talked about the challenges and then the amount of time we've got left. On the flip side, what are some of the most exciting opportunities you see in the economic development landscape for the future?
Well, compared to 20 years ago, so there are companies that want to be in small to mid-sized towns. They want to be there. I have personally visited with them, some of which I've represented. Some didn't hire us, but I talked with them enough to know what they wanted. They hired somebody else. They want, when I grew up, I just had this inferiority complex. We just thought, not just me, but basically everybody in the town, we just thought that everybody looked at us as small and hicks or whatever. Nobody wanted to be there. And that's totally not true. I'm telling you, there are companies that want to be located in rural towns. The issue we had 20 years ago is, how do you just let anybody know that you exist? Because you're one of millions of other towns. Georgia's got like 160 counties. So, if you're in Georgia, how do you just let them know your county over the other 159 or whatever? But now with online marketing and YouTube and all of this, I think that this is actually the greatest time ever to do rural economic development, because you actually now can let people know who you are. I mean, it requires, a real strategy and forethought of how you want to go about it. But, where you used to have to spend all this money on ads or whatever, now you can do all kind of marketing and it don't cost as much and actually get your name out there. So I think that's exciting. After COVID, I saw people want to be back in the smaller towns. And so I think there's more demand for that than ever. And I think there's going to be a lot of demand of manufacturing in the small towns for stuff that goes to the big cities. So you're seeing all these data centers be built. Even if you don't win a data center, there's a lot of parts that go in that data center. And so you may end up winning a manufacturer off of that. And so I think there's tons of opportunity there. And the last thing I'd say, we are reshoring jobs back to the United States. That has happened after COVID and really through no policy. I know now Trump's got all this tariffs, but the data I saw was last year before the election. And jobs were coming back just because companies realized they needed redundant supply in the U.S. in case of COVID or whatever ever happens again. We can't get our goods. And so jobs are being reshored. And now you add the tariffs on it, that'll probably reshore even more. So I think now is probably as good a time as ever to get some of these jobs back.
Well, I'm like you, Chad. I'm bullish on rural economic development, and and we're not going to get into a conversation because that's a whole different subject. But with tools like AI now, for these rural economic developers, it helps level the playing field some.
Absolutely. But let me tell you something, and this hit me over the head when COVID first started. You brought up COVID. The big cities in our country can't make it without our small towns. And see, when I was a boy, like I said, we were kind of raised with an inferiority complex, just that everybody looked down on our little town or whatever. When COVID hit, I don't know if you remember the first night or two of it, Andrew Cuomo was the governor of New York.
Yes.
And I put the TV on, and he came on TV, and he said, we've got a crisis. We don't have enough gowns and gloves and blankets and so forth for our nurses. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was like the guru.
It absolutely hit me over the head, Joe. My grandmother worked in a glove factory in my little hometown, and my daddy worked in the blanket factory. And I was sitting there hearing the governor of New York say that the New York hospitals couldn't get gloves and blankets. And that's the very plants that my parents worked in that got shipped overseas, and some of that's coming back now. And so the night I heard that, it did. I still remember it to this day. I remember thinking, that's the first time it ever really hit me. Our big cities can't make it without our little cities. And so it takes all of us.
Well, Chad, I appreciate your time. We could talk for hours. I love the conversation, your knowledge, and the fact you're a small town guy and you've been there and done that. So for our listeners, where can people find out more about you and more about Next Move Group?
Yeah, we got 2 or 3 things coming up. So one, go to nextmovegroup.com. You can learn all about us. We are about to restart our podcast. We've got 100 or so podcast episodes out there in YouTube. But my nephew came down with cancer 2 years ago, and he went down fast. And I spent a bunch of time with him before he passed away, and I got off track when it came to all of our podcasts. And so I used to do one literally every Thursday, but I got off track. But we're about to start that back now and get in a routine so that they can see the Google our YouTube or go to the Next Move Group We Are Jobs podcast. And then every 2 years in New Orleans, we have an event the week before Mardi Gras. And it's an economic development conference. And as a matter of fact, I've had a lot of people come and say, Chad, I almost didn't get funded to come to this because my folks didn't want to pay for me to go to a Mardi Gras party. And I got down here, and it was a real conference. I said, yeah, we do that on purpose. We have a real conference. So basically, the Wednesday and Thursday before Mardi Gras, we have a conference in New Orleans, and it's about small to mid-sized town economic development. And we have site selectors come, and we have a lot of speakers. And, I mean, it's a 2-day conference. And we do end it with going to a Mardi Gras parade. We have a balcony that overlooks it. It's kind of the last family-friendly night before things get crazy in New Orleans. So you can still come and not do the craziness if you don't want to. If you want to do the craziness, you can stay an extra day. But the conference ends. And that's coming up next February. You can see it on our website if you go to nextmovegroup.com. We're promoting it now. We've got 8 site selectors already signed up to come. 4 of which are in the Site Selectors Guild. Mike Mullet's right there from West Tennessee is one of them coming. And but we've already got our topics out, and we're going to talk about a lot of this we just talked about. Child care. We're going to talk about crime. On New Year's Day this year, I woke up, and my hometown in Mississippi had 3 people shot at the gas station. A town of 900 people. That was my first text. My second text is my adopted town of New Orleans. I looked at, they had been hit with a terrorist attack, 15 people killed. Same morning, whether you was in my little bitty hometown or in my adopted town, you were in danger. So we're going to have one session on crime and what is our role as economic developers in crime. And I don't speak at all these sessions. I invite experts to come speak. But if folks want to come, I mean, the whole thing's set up really to help small to mid-sized towns. So go to our website and see it. We'd love to have you.
Well, the conference is educational, and then the post-conference is very educational, would you say?
It is, and I'm going to tell you something. I had it last time we did it, because we do it every 2 years. Last time we did it, we had it a week or two before some big site selectors conference. And I was at some event a month later, and somebody come up, and he said, I want you to know I got as much or more out of your deal than I did going to that big site selectors conference, and which I appreciated. But I said, really, why? He said, well, the conference I went to, they would set us in round tables, and I'd be sitting there with 8 other people. It was like speed dating or whatever, telling the site selector. He said, I got to come to yours, and that Mardi Gras parade lasted 4 hours. He said, I got to stand on your balcony and talk to the site selector for over an hour. And he said, that was valuable time for me. So yeah, we've designed it to where you get something out of it if you come, but it is a lot of fun.
Well, Chad Chancellor has been our guest today, and as always, we welcome your comments or suggestions, and you can reach us at RuralStrong@gmail.com. We appreciate you listening and look forward to being with you next time. Thanks for joining us on Rural Strong. If you found this helpful, share it, and follow the show for more insights from rural leaders making a real difference. Until next time, stay rural strong.